You paid $300 for that. The laughter rolled across the auction yard before Luke Carter could even answer. A few people shook their heads. Others pulled out their phones to take pictures of what looked like nothing more than a rusted heap of metal sitting on 4 flat tires. The old car barely resembled a vehicle anymore. Its paint had long disappeared beneath decades of neglect. The windshield was cracked. The interior was ruined. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised someone had placed a bid. Yet Luke simply handed over the money and signed the paperwork without saying a word. Sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one who feels no need to prove it. The spring sun hung low above the small-town auction lot outside Columbus, Ohio. Dust drifted through the warm afternoon air. Buyers wandered between tractors, old farm equipment, and forgotten vehicles. Most people had come searching for bargains. Nobody had come searching for treasure, especially not in the form of a wrecked 1967 Mustang buried beneath rust and dirt. Luke walked around the car slowly, studying every inch. His 10-year-old son Noah stood beside him with his hands in his pockets. "Dad," Noah said carefully, "are you sure about this?" Luke smiled. "Not really." Noah blinked. "That is not exactly comforting." Luke laughed softly. Nearby, another wave of laughter erupted from a small group gathered near a black luxury SUV. Standing at the center of the group was Victoria Hayes, Chief Executive Officer of Hayes Automotive Group. Her company manufactured some of the most successful luxury vehicles in America. Magazine covers loved her. Investors admired her. Competitors feared her. Victoria glanced toward the rusted Mustang and raised an eyebrow. "That thing belongs in a scrapyard," she remarked. One executive beside her chuckled. Another nodded in agreement. $300 would have been better spent on a lawn mower. More laughter followed. Noah lowered his eyes. Children often feel embarrassment more deeply than adults. Luke noticed immediately. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Do you know what most people see?" he asked. Noah looked at the Mustang. "A disaster." "Exactly." Noah frowned. "And what do you see?" Luke studied the car for several seconds. The sunlight reflected faintly off a hidden section of original chrome buried beneath years of corrosion. His expression softened. "Potential." Noah looked unconvinced. Across the lot, Victoria overheard the exchange and shook her head. She had spent her entire career evaluating assets. Numbers made sense. Markets made sense. Investments made sense. This purchase did not. She walked toward them, curiosity overcoming politeness. "You actually think that car has value?" she asked. Luke turned politely. "I do." Victoria glanced back at the vehicle. "Based on what?" Luke smiled. "A feeling." The executives behind her laughed again. Victoria almost joined them. Almost. Yet something about Luke's calm confidence stopped her. He was not defensive. He was not trying to impress anyone. He simply seemed certain. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "I hope your feeling is worth $300. Luke nodded. "Me too." The conversation ended there. No argument. No challenge. No attempt to prove himself right. Victoria walked away still convinced he had made a foolish decision. Noah helped his father attach a tow strap to the old Mustang. The rusted wheels barely turned as they pulled it toward their truck. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass from nearby fields. Most people returned to bidding on more practical purchases. Nobody paid attention to Luke anymore. Nobody except one elderly auctioneer standing near the office door. The old man watched the Mustang disappear down the road and quietly smiled. Because unlike everyone else, he recognized something hidden beneath the rust. And deep inside that broken car rested a secret worth far more than anyone at the auction realized. The drive home took nearly an hour. The old Mustang rattled behind Luke's pickup truck as they traveled along Tulane country roads lined with green fields and weathered fences. Every few miles Noah glanced into the side mirror and shook his head. The car looked even worse now than it had at the auction. Rust covered almost every visible surface. One headlight hung loose. Parts of the body appeared ready to crumble apart entirely. "Dad," Noah finally said, "I am trying really hard to trust you." Luke smiled without taking his eyes off the road. "That sounds serious." "It is serious." Noah folded his arms. "Because right now it looks like we paid $300 for a giant pile of problems." Luke laughed softly. The sound filled the cab of the truck. "You are not wrong." Noah groaned. "That is not helping." Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the countryside as they turned onto the gravel road leading to their farmhouse outside Newark, Ohio. The property was modest but well cared for. A white barn stood behind the house. Beside it sat a large detached garage where Luke spent most evenings working on restoration projects. The garage had once belonged to his grandfather. Inside were decades of tools, parts, manuals, and memories. To Noah, it felt like a second home. The moment they arrived, Luke backed the trailer toward the garage entrance. Together they carefully rolled the Mustang inside. Dust floated through beams of sunlight pouring from the high windows. The air smelled faintly of motor oil, old wood, and fresh coffee. For a few moments neither spoke. They simply stared at the car. "Okay," Noah admitted. "It looks slightly better indoors." Luke nodded. "Everything deserves a chance to be seen in the right light." Noah raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like something from one of those life lesson books." "Maybe." Luke grabbed a flashlight from a nearby workbench and began inspecting the vehicle more closely. Unlike the crowd at the auction, he was not looking at the rust. He was looking beyond it. He studied the frame numbers. He checked hidden body panels. He examined small manufacturing details most people would never notice. His expression grew more focused with every passing minute. Noah noticed immediately. "You found something." Luke remained silent. "Dad." Still nothing. "Dad." Finally Luke looked up. "Maybe." Noah's eyes widened. "Maybe what?" Luke ran a hand across a section of damaged metal near the rear quarter panel. Beneath years of grime, he uncovered a tiny factory stamp. His heartbeat quickened. Some discoveries whisper before they speak. This one had just begun whispering. That evening they ordered pizza and ate dinner inside the garage. Noah sat on a rolling mechanics stool while Luke continued studying old manuals spread across a workbench. Outside, crickets filled the warm spring air. Inside, pages turned quietly beneath fluorescent lights. "What are you looking for?" Noah asked. Luke pointed toward a faded photograph in one of the books. "This." Noah compared the image to the Mustang sitting across the garage. "They do not look the same." "Not yet." Noah smiled. He had heard that tone before. It was the tone his father used whenever he solved difficult problems. The same tone he used fixing engines nobody else could repair. The same tone he used when teaching Noah how to ride a bicycle after weeks of failed attempts. It was the sound of quiet confidence. Later that night, after Noah had gone to bed, Luke remained alone in the garage. Rain began tapping softly against the roof overhead. The Mustang sat beneath a row of hanging lights. Most people would have seen scrap metal. Most people would have seen a mistake. Luke saw something entirely different. Carefully, he wiped away another layer of dirt near the firewall. A hidden identification plate slowly emerged. He read the numbers once, then again, then a third time. His eyes widened slightly. The old auctioneer had recognized something unusual. Luke now understood why. Because if those numbers were genuine, the car sitting in front of him was not merely an abandoned wreck. It was one of the rarest factory variations ever produced. And nobody at that auction had realized what they were looking at. The next morning, Noah found his father asleep in a chair inside the garage. An open manual rested across Luke's chest. Several pages of handwritten notes covered the workbench nearby. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles drifting through the air. The Mustang sat exactly where it had the night before, silent and forgotten by the world. Yet something had changed. Luke looked excited, truly excited. Noah had not seen that expression in years. "Did you figure something out?" he asked. Luke sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Maybe." Noah laughed. "You always say maybe when the answer is definitely yes." Luke smiled. "Smart kid." Together, they spent the morning removing damaged interior panels. Most of the material was beyond saving. Old fabric crumbled at the slightest touch. Springs poked through torn seats. The dashboard had suffered decades of neglect. Yet underneath the decay, small clues continued appearing. Factory markings, rare trim pieces, unique manufacturing details. Every discovery seemed to confirm Luke's growing suspicion. Around noon, Noah wiped sweat from his forehead and sat on an overturned bucket. "I still do not understand how you know all this stuff." Luke paused. For a moment, he simply looked at the car. "Because a long time ago, this used to be my whole world." Noah frowned. "Before Mom." Luke nodded. Even before that. The garage grew quieter. Outside, birds sang from nearby trees. Somewhere in the distance, a tractor moved through a neighboring field. Noah leaned forward. You never talk about that. Luke stared at the Mustang. Some memories are not painful because they hurt. They are painful because they remind us of who we used to be. Years ago, Luke said softly, people used to bring rare cars from all over the country for me to restore. Museums, collectors, auction houses. Noah blinked. Seriously? Luke laughed. Seriously. Then why did you stop? The question lingered in the air. Luke looked toward a framed photograph hanging near the workbench. A younger version of himself stood beside his wife, Emily, holding a newborn Noah. The smile on his face looked different then, lighter somehow. Life changed, Luke answered gently. Noah followed his gaze and understood. He did not ask anything else. Respect often begins when people learn which questions not to ask. Later that afternoon, nearly 80 miles away in downtown Columbus, Victoria Hayes sat inside a glass conference room overlooking the city skyline. Quarterly reports covered the table. Executives discussed production forecasts. Market analysts debated trends. Yet Victoria found her attention drifting elsewhere. The image of the auction returned unexpectedly. The single father, the rusted Mustang, the strange confidence in his voice. One executive noticed her distraction. Victoria? She looked up. Sorry. Continue. The meeting resumed, but curiosity had already taken hold. That evening, after work, she searched public vehicle records connected to the auction lot. It took only minutes to locate the purchase information. Luke Carter, Newark, Ohio. She stared at the name for a moment. $300, she muttered. What exactly are you seeing that everyone else missed? Back in Newark, Luke had just uncovered another clue. Hidden beneath layers of dirt and corrosion was an original factory identification tag that matched a production run so limited most collectors never encountered one in person. Noah watched as his father's eyes widened again. That is good, right? Luke slowly nodded. Very good. How good? Luke exhaled. Good enough that we need to be extremely careful from this point forward. Noah stood and walked around the car once more. For the first time, he was no longer looking at a wreck. He was looking at a mystery. The same mystery that had already begun changing their lives. And neither father nor son realized that somewhere beyond the walls of their quiet garage, someone else had started paying attention too. Summer settled over Ohio with long evenings and warm air drifting through the open garage doors. Day after day, Luke and Noah worked side by side. Rusted bolts came loose. Damaged panels were removed. Parts were carefully labeled and organized across shelves. Progress happened slowly, but it happened. Some nights they worked for only an hour. Other nights they stayed until the stars filled the sky. The Mustang was no longer just a project. It had become something shared between father and son. One Saturday morning, Noah arrived in the garage carrying 2 cups of coffee. One real coffee for Luke. 1 cup of hot chocolate for himself. Good morning, partner, Luke said. Noah grinned. Partner sounds better than assistant. Luke laughed. You got promoted. Noah set the drinks down and stared at the stripped vehicle. How long until it actually looks like a car again? Luke walked around the frame thoughtfully. A while. Noah groaned. That is your second favorite answer. What is my first? Maybe. Luke smiled and returned to work. Across the garage, sunlight reflected off newly cleaned metal. The rare identification tag remained safely protected inside a folder on the workbench. Luke had spent countless hours researching production records. Every new discovery confirmed the same thing. The Mustang was far more valuable than anyone had imagined. Yet he told almost nobody. Some opportunities grow best in silence. Nearly 50 miles away, Victoria Hayes found herself thinking about the mysterious purchase far more often than she cared to admit. During meetings, she caught herself wondering how much progress had been made. During lunch, she searched restoration forums and historical records connected to rare Mustang variants. The more she learned, the more curious she became. Finally, curiosity won. One afternoon, she entered her vehicle and drove toward Newark. She told herself it was professional interest. She told herself she simply wanted answers. Deep down, she knew it was something else. 2 hours later, her luxury SUV rolled slowly onto the gravel road leading toward Luke's property. The farmhouse appeared exactly as she imagined. Simple, well-maintained, honest. She parked near the garage and stepped outside. The sound of tools echoed from within. Noah spotted her first. Dad, he called. The auction lady is here. Luke looked up from the engine compartment and smiled politely. Good afternoon. Victoria crossed her arms. I wanted to see if your $300 investment survived. Noah immediately grinned. Luke shook his head. We are still working. Victoria stepped closer. For several seconds, she simply studied the vehicle. It looked different now. Not finished. Not even close. But she could see signs of progress everywhere. Fresh metal. Organized parts. Careful craftsmanship. The project no longer looked foolish. It looked deliberate. You have done a lot already, she admitted. Noah's eyes widened. That sounds suspiciously like a compliment. Victoria laughed despite herself. Maybe it was. Luke noticed something changing in her attitude. The confidence remained. The success remained. But the certainty that she had everything figured out seemed slightly softer now. She walked around the car one more time. You still think it is worth saving? Luke glanced at the Mustang. Then he looked at Noah. Absolutely. Victoria followed his gaze toward the boy. She noticed grease stains on Noah's hands and pride in his eyes. Suddenly, she understood something she had missed at the auction. The value of this project had never been measured only in dollars. It was measured in time, patience, purpose, memories being built one evening at a time. For the first time, Victoria stopped seeing a wrecked car. And for the first time, she began wondering whether the single father everyone underestimated might be seeing something the rest of the world had overlooked. August faded into September, and the garage became the center of life on the Carter property. While most people measured progress in weeks, Luke measured it in evenings. One repaired panel at a time. One restored component at a time. One lesson shared with Noah at a time. The project moved forward with quiet determination. Summer heat gave way to cooler mornings. The fields surrounding the farmhouse shifted from deep green toward gold. Yet inside the garage, the rhythm never changed. After school, Noah would drop his backpack near the door and head straight to the workbench. Luke would already be there, sleeves rolled up, reviewing plans for the next stage of restoration. What are we working on today? Noah asked one afternoon. Luke smiled. The dashboard. Noah groaned dramatically. That sounds less exciting than the engine. Trust me, Luke replied. Details matter. Noah looked around the garage. You say that about everything. Luke laughed. Because it is true. Over the following weeks, the Mustang slowly began looking like a car again. Fresh body panels replaced damaged sections. The frame received careful treatment and protection. Original parts were cleaned and restored whenever possible. Luke refused shortcuts. Every bolt, every bracket, every piece had a purpose. Noah began noticing things he never would have seen before. Manufacturing marks, assembly codes, historical details hidden in plain sight. What started as a restoration project was becoming an education. One rainy evening, while thunder rolled softly outside, Noah sat on a stool watching his father work. Dad, Luke looked up. Yeah. Noah hesitated. Why did you never tell me you were famous? Luke nearly dropped a wrench. I was never famous. The internet says otherwise. Luke shook his head and smiled. Earlier that day, Noah had discovered old magazine articles featuring Luke's restorations from years ago. Award-winning projects, national exhibitions, collector showcases. A younger version of his father appeared in every photograph. Those were a long time ago, Luke said quietly. Noah studied him for a moment. You were really good. Luke returned his attention to the car. I was fortunate. Noah frowned. You always do that. Do what? Act like everything just happened by accident. Luke paused. Then he smiled. Maybe because I learned a long time ago that talent matters less than character. Noah considered the answer. The garage fell quiet again except for rain tapping against the roof. Across the state, Victoria Hayes found herself making occasional visits to the Carter property whenever business brought her near Newark. At first, she claimed it was curiosity. Then she stopped pretending. She genuinely enjoyed watching the progress. Each visit revealed another transformation. The rusted shell she remembered from the auction was slowly disappearing. In its place emerged something remarkable. One afternoon, she arrived carrying sandwiches from a local deli. Noah immediately spotted her vehicle. The auction lady is back. Victoria laughed as she stepped inside. I feel like I need a better nickname. Noah pointed toward the Mustang. You can earn one after you admit Dad was right. Luke shook his head. Easy, buddy. Victoria walked around the car slowly. Fresh paint had not yet been applied, but the craftsmanship was impossible to miss. Every line looked intentional. Every surface reflected patience. She found herself increasingly impressed. "I have to admit," she said, "this is becoming something special." Noah folded his arms proudly. "Told you." Victoria smiled. Then her attention drifted toward Luke. He was not celebrating. He was not bragging. He was simply working. The same calm focus. The same quiet confidence. The same dignity that had been there from the beginning. Success reveals character. So does the absence of recognition. Luke seemed unchanged by either one. As autumn approached, the Mustang stood nearly complete. Most of the hardest work was behind them. Yet neither Luke nor Noah realized the biggest discovery still waited ahead. Hidden beneath years of assumptions was one final secret that would change everything they thought they knew about the car. October arrived with crisp air and bright leaves covering the roads around Newark. The Carter garage remained busy nearly every evening. The Mustang now looked nothing like the wreck that had left the auction yard months earlier. Fresh bodywork reflected the overhead lights. Restored chrome pieces gleamed from the workbench. The interior had begun taking shape. Anyone walking through the garage would have recognized a remarkable transformation. Yet Luke seemed more focused than ever. Something still bothered him. One Tuesday evening, after Noah finished homework, he found his father studying old factory records spread across the workbench. "You have that look again," Noah said. Luke glanced up. "What look?" "The one that means your brain is working on something important." Luke smiled. "You notice too much." Noah pulled up a stool. "So what is it?" Luke tapped a stack of documents. "There is one detail that does not make sense." Noah leaned forward. "About the car?" "About its history." The garage grew quiet except for the hum of a small heater in the corner. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Luke pointed toward a series of identification numbers. "Everything says this car should be rare." Noah nodded. "You have said that before. But these numbers suggest something even more unusual." Noah frowned. "Good unusual?" Luke looked at the car. "Very good unusual." The following weekend, they attended a regional collector gathering nearly 40 miles away. Luke wanted a second opinion from several respected restoration experts. The event filled a large fairground building with vintage vehicles, enthusiasts, and industry professionals. Noah wandered between displays while Luke carried photographs and documentation. Several experts reviewed the information carefully. One man adjusted his glasses and stared at the paperwork for nearly a minute. "Where did you find this car?" he finally asked. Luke smiled. "An auction." The man laughed. "Someone made a very expensive mistake." Another expert examined the identification numbers and slowly shook his head. "If everything checks out, this may be one of the most overlooked finds I have heard about in years." Noah nearly dropped the soda he was holding. "Seriously?" The expert nodded. "Seriously. Sometimes a secret becomes impossible to keep hidden." Word traveled quickly through the collector community. Within days, Luke began receiving phone calls from people interested in the project. Some offered advice. Others offered money. One collector offered $25,000 immediately without even seeing the finished vehicle. Luke politely declined. A week later, another offer arrived. $35,000. He declined again. Noah stared at the number on the email. "Dad, that is more money than most people make in months." Luke nodded. "I know. And you said no." "I did." Noah looked confused. "Why?" Luke glanced toward the Mustang. "Because we are not finished." Meanwhile, Victoria Hayes continued following the restoration with growing fascination. During one visit to the garage, she noticed the increased activity. Collectors were calling. Experts were stopping by. People who once would have ignored the project now wanted a closer look. Victoria watched Luke handle every conversation exactly the same way. Calm, respectful, humble. No bragging, no boasting, no dramatic speeches. The attention never seemed to change him. One afternoon, she arrived while Luke was carefully polishing a restored trim piece. "You realize people are talking about this car everywhere now," she said. Luke shrugged lightly. "People talk." Victoria laughed. "That is your response. Should it be something else?" She studied him for a moment. Most people would have celebrated. Most people would have enjoyed proving everyone wrong. Luke seemed interested only in finishing the work. As the autumn sun lowered outside the garage windows, Victoria found herself looking at him differently than she had at the auction. Back then she saw a man making a foolish purchase. Now she saw a craftsman revealing something hidden beneath years of neglect. And neither she nor Noah realized that the biggest moment of the entire journey was now only weeks away. November arrived carrying cold mornings and clear skies. After months of work, the Mustang finally stood complete beneath the lights of the Carter garage. Deep metallic blue paint reflected every beam overhead. Restored chrome shined along the body lines. The interior looked exactly as it would have decades earlier. Every detail had been carefully returned to life. Yet when Luke stepped back to admire the finished car, his attention was not on the paint or the engine. It was on Noah. The boy who had started the journey doubting everything now walked around the Mustang with pride in his eyes. "We actually did it," Noah whispered. Luke smiled. "We did." For several moments, they simply stood there. The garage felt different somehow. Quieter. Fuller. Like the end of something important. Outside, fallen leaves drifted across the driveway. Inside, months of patience had finally become visible. A few days later, Luke decided it was time. The annual Ohio Classic Vehicle Showcase was scheduled for the following weekend. Collectors from across the Midwest would attend. Restorers, historians, auction representatives, industry leaders. It was exactly the kind of event where rare discoveries attracted attention. Noah could barely contain his excitement. "Do you think people will like it?" Luke laughed softly. "I hope so. Do you think they will know what it is?" Luke glanced toward the Mustang. "The right people will." The morning of the showcase arrived bright and cold. Hundreds of vehicles filled the exhibition grounds. Some were worth tens of thousands of dollars. Others much more. Crowds moved between displays carrying coffee cups and cameras. Conversations echoed beneath clear autumn skies. When Luke unloaded the Mustang, very few people paid attention at first. Then someone recognized the identification details. A small crowd gathered. Then another. Within an hour, collectors surrounded the vehicle. Experts studied the restoration. Historians examined the documentation. Questions came from every direction. Noah stood beside his father watching it happen. "Dad," he said quietly, "I think everybody suddenly cares." Luke smiled. "Looks that way." Across the exhibition grounds, a familiar black SUV arrived near the main entrance. Victoria Hayes stepped out and immediately noticed the crowd. Curiosity drew her closer. The moment she saw the Mustang, she stopped walking. For several seconds, she simply stared. The wreck she had mocked months earlier was gone. In its place stood one of the most impressive restorations she had ever seen. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every line looked flawless. Every detail reflected care. Every inch reflected mastery. Victoria slowly approached the display. "Luke." He turned and smiled politely. "Good morning." She shook her head in disbelief. "This cannot be the same car." Noah grinned. "That is what everybody keeps saying." Victoria laughed. Then she looked back at the Mustang. For the first time since meeting Luke, she truly understood what she had been witnessing all along. Not luck. Not coincidence. Expertise. Patience. Quiet excellence. The crowd continued growing throughout the day. Industry professionals requested interviews. Collectors exchanged business cards. Representatives from several auction firms asked questions about future plans. Yet Luke remained exactly the same man he had been at the auction. Calm. Humble. Grounded. The attention never changed him because he had never been working for attention. As afternoon sunlight reflected across the polished paint, an auction representative approached with an expression that immediately caught Luke's attention. The man carried a folder in one hand and a smile in the other. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I believe several buyers would like to discuss something important." Noah looked up curiously. Victoria folded her arms. Luke listened quietly, and within moments, everyone standing beside the Mustang realized that the story of the old car was about to become far bigger than any of them expected. The auction representative led Luke, Noah, and Victoria toward a private section of the exhibition hall where several serious collectors had gathered. The atmosphere felt different there. Conversations were quieter. Questions were more specific. These were not casual admirers. These were people who understood exactly what they were looking at. One collector from Michigan studied the documentation for several minutes before speaking. "Mr. Carter, this restoration is exceptional." Another nodded. "The vehicle itself is rare. The quality of the work makes it even rarer." Noah stood beside his father trying to remain calm, but excitement showed on his face. Victoria watched everything unfold with growing respect. Months ago, she had laughed at the purchase. Now industry experts were treating it like a museum piece. The representative opened a folder and glanced around the room. Several parties have expressed interest in acquiring the vehicle today. Luke folded his arms comfortably. I appreciate that. Would you be open to hearing offers? Luke looked toward Noah before answering. We can listen. The first offer came quickly. $50,000. Noah's eyes widened. The second collector immediately raised it to $65,000. The room grew quieter. A third collector offered $80,000. Victoria stared at Luke. He showed almost no reaction. No excitement. No panic. No celebration. Just calm attention. The same dignity he had shown from the beginning. The representative smiled. Gentlemen, I believe we are just getting started. Word spread throughout the showcase. More buyers arrived. More experts gathered around the display area. Within an hour, the discussion had transformed into an informal bidding contest. $90,000. Then $100,000. Cameras appeared. Spectators whispered. Some people recognized Luke from old restoration articles and began connecting the pieces of the story. The single father who quietly bought a wrecked car had turned it into one of the most talked-about vehicles at the event. Noah leaned toward his father. Dad, is this real? Luke smiled softly. Looks like it. You are way too calm. Victoria laughed. I have been thinking the same thing all day. Another collector stepped forward. He examined the car carefully before extending his hand toward Luke. $120,000. The room fell silent. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The number seemed to hang in the air. Even the representative looked impressed. Noah blinked twice. Then 3 times. 120,000. He whispered. Luke finally exhaled slowly. The offer was real. The months of work. The late nights. The research. The patience. Everything had led to this moment. Yet what struck him most was not the money. It was the expression on Noah's face. Pride. Confidence. Belief. Things no auction could measure. The representative looked around the room. No higher offers came. Several collectors nodded respectfully. They knew the value. They also knew the offer was fair. Finally, the representative turned to Luke. The decision is yours. Luke looked at Noah. What do you think? Noah stared at the car, then at his father, then back at the car again. I think we already won. The answer surprised everyone, especially Luke. A smile spread across his face. Sometimes wisdom arrives in small voices. After a few moments, Luke shook hands with the collector and accepted the offer. Applause broke out across the room. Cameras flashed. Congratulations came from every direction. Yet amid all the attention, one person remained unusually quiet. Victoria Hayes stood beside the Mustang, looking at the reflection of the exhibition lights across its polished paint. Months earlier, she had seen only rust. Today, she saw character, skill, perseverance. And as the crowd slowly gathered around Luke and Noah, she realized she owed the single father something she had never expected to give. An apology. The drive home from the showcase felt different. The autumn sun dipped low across the Ohio countryside, painting the fields in gold and amber. Noah sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, still processing everything that had happened. Every few minutes he would shake his head and laugh softly to himself. Luke noticed. What is so funny? Noah looked over. A few months ago, everyone thought that car was junk. Luke smiled. Including you. Noah grinned. Especially me. For a moment, both laughed. Then the truck grew quiet again. Not uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something meaningful. Back at the exhibition grounds, Victoria remained standing beside the empty display space where the Mustang had sat. The crowd had moved on. The cameras were gone. The excitement had faded. Yet one thing remained unfinished. She spotted Luke and Noah preparing to leave and walked toward them. Luke. He turned. Victoria. For a second, she seemed unsure what to say. That alone surprised him. Confident people rarely struggle for words. Finally, she took a breath. I owe you an apology. Noah glanced between them. Victoria continued. The day of the auction, I judged you without knowing anything about you. I looked at the car and assumed you had made a mistake. Then I looked at you and assumed the same thing. Luke listened quietly. I was wrong. The wind moved gently through the trees surrounding the parking lot. Somewhere nearby, a flag fluttered against its pole. Victoria lowered her eyes briefly. I spent my career evaluating assets and opportunities. Yet somehow I missed the most important thing. Luke waited. What was that? A small smile appeared on her face. The person behind the project. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Luke nodded. Thank you. That was all. No lecture. No victory speech. No reminder that she had laughed at him. Just grace. Just dignity. Noah noticed the surprise on Victoria's face. She had expected more. Most people would have demanded it. Luke never did. Character does not need an audience. It reveals itself in moments like that. Several weeks later, the funds from the sale had been deposited. The money created new possibilities for the Carter family. College savings for Noah. Financial security. Freedom from worries that had followed them for years. Yet life at the farmhouse looked remarkably unchanged. Luke still worked in the garage. Noah still rushed home from school. They still ate dinner together every evening. One Saturday morning, Noah found his father cleaning a workbench. "So what happens now?" he asked. Luke looked around the garage. "Now we find the next project." Noah laughed. "You really cannot help yourself." "Probably not." Then Noah became serious. "Dad, yeah." The boy hesitated. Was the car the best thing that came from all this? Luke looked toward the empty space where the Mustang had spent months sitting. Sunlight streamed through the garage windows. Dust floated through the beams of light. Memories seemed to linger in every corner. Then he looked back at his son. "No." Noah frowned. "It was not." Luke shook his head. "The best thing we built was this." He placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. The boy's eyes widened slightly as he understood. The late nights. The conversations. The lessons. The trust. The time together. Those things had always mattered more than the car. Outside, the countryside rested beneath a clear blue sky. Inside, father and son stood quietly in the garage that had changed both of their lives. No reporters. No collectors. No applause. Just a simple moment between two people who had built something valuable together. And perhaps that was the real treasure all along. Sometimes the greatest victories are not measured in dollars. They are measured in character, perseverance, and the people who walk beside us through the journey. If this story reminded you that second chances matter and that true value often hides beneath the surface, share your thoughts below. And if stories of dignity, grace, and quiet redemption speak to your heart, we would be honored to have you join us again for the next one.